Millions of bits of data bombard human senses every single second. An unfiltered encounter with reality presents far more information than human neurology can handle. In 1956, cognitive psychologist George Miller quantified this limitation. He discovered that the conscious mind can actively process only between 5 and 9 pieces of information at any given time. To prevent cognitive paralysis, the brain performs aggressive data triage. An immense volume of incoming information is filtered out, distorted, or generalized before it reaches conscious awareness. The mechanisms executing this triage are called metaprograms. These are unconscious filtering algorithms that dictate exactly what you pay attention to, how you process that specific data, and how you subsequently communicate your experience to others. We initially inherit these programs in childhood from our parents, teachers, and culture. Over time, life experiences modify them, shifting the sensitivity of our filters to adapt to different environments and professional contexts. Because Miller's bandwidth limit forces the brain to discard the vast majority of sensory data, the reality you consciously experience is a highly edited summary, a version of events formatted by your personal cognitive filters. Building immediate rapport involves matching a counterpart's vocabulary alongside their physical behavior. Researchers Richard Bandler and John Grinder proved that people who rely on similar language patterns develop deeper rapport at a much faster rate. Shared linguistics signal a shared cognitive architecture. Communication breakdowns occur when we are unaware of the specific metaprograms governing the other side of the table. You speak, but their filters delete the data. Metaprograms function as mental maps. They help us navigate surroundings, to assess incoming risk, and evaluate incoming arguments. When you adapt your language to match a counterpart's metaprograms, you bypass conscious resistance. Your words align directly with their unconscious processing routines. Influence requires active translation. You must decode a counterpart's cognitive architecture by listening to the structures in their speech, and then format your message to pass smoothly through their internal filters. Think of human cognition as a customizable dashboard. The first parameter to identify is the action scale, determining whether a person operates as proactive or reactive. Proactive individuals take charge, initiate movement, and spot solutions quickly. Reactive individuals prefer to take stock, analyze the situation, and wait for the appropriate time or explicit instructions before acting. You can identify them by their verbs. A proactive person urges the team to just do it or take control, while a reactive person asks to mull it over, study the data, or weigh the pros and cons. Their physiology reveals the filter. Proactive operators exhibit quicker movements and erect, impatient posture. Reactive individuals display slower, more deliberate movements and often maintain a slouched, contained physical presence. In a chronically reactive, paralyzed IT department that refused to communicate with other staff, a proactive leader diagnosed the bottleneck. They built a documented list of operating instructions and mandated regular interdepartmental meetings, ending years of dysfunction. The next parameter is the motivation scale, moving toward goals versus moving away from problems. This chart models the failure rate of an away-from motivation strategy in fitness. The subject loses weight rapidly to get away from a painful state. Once the threat of that pain recedes, they lose focus, the weight returns, and the cycle repeats. Toward-oriented people are driven by the acquisition of benefits, like bonuses or improved status. Away-from individuals are driven by threat mitigation, securing their position by anticipating negative consequences. While toward types are excellent at conceptualizing growth, away-from types are essential for critical analysis, managing ongoing crises, and maintaining systems where failure has severe consequences, like commercial aviation. Diagnosing the direction of a team member's motivation allows a leader to offer the exact incentive that triggers their internal drive, avoiding wasted effort on rewards they do not value. Next, we analyze how a person evaluates rules and instructions using the options versus procedures filter. An options person thrives on variety and actively looks for ways to bend or bypass established rules to test new methods. A procedures person requires set methodologies and feels cheated if they cannot complete every sequential step of a process. Ask someone why they bought a specific car. An options buyer lists the possibilities it opens up. A procedures buyer will give you a chronologically ordered story of the research they conducted, concluding with specific maintenance intervals. The standard for success is determined by the internal versus external filter. An internal person trusts their own judgment to validate their work. An external person needs consistent outward feedback to confirm they have done a good job. Managing these two requires different tactics. Internals heavily resist micromanagement and prefer to set their own standards. Externals are collaborative but require clear direction and regular praise to maintain momentum. To trigger action from an internal, use phrasing like, "Study the facts to help you decide." For an external, use validation phrasing like, "The statistics show," or "Expert opinion agrees." Finally, human pattern recognition operates on the sameness versus difference filter, determining exactly what a person notices first when presented with new information. A sameness thinker maps new data against familiar patterns, highly valuing stability and resisting major structural changes. A difference thinker zeroes in on discrepancies and thrives in environments that undergo constant, rapid revolution. To diagnose this in real time, lay out 3 objects of identical size but arrange them uniquely and ask them to describe the relationship between them. The visual data is identical, but verbal responses reveal the cognitive filter. A sameness thinker says, "They are all rectangles." A sameness with difference thinker notes, "They're rectangles, but one is vertical." A difference thinker bypasses similarities, stating, "They're laid out differently." Disagreements over project direction often have nothing to do with the actual strategy. Mismatched chunk sizes and conflicting pattern recognition styles create friction that feels like professional conflict, but is actually an issue of data formatting. Metaprograms are not rigid pigeonholes or binary categories intended to permanently categorize human behavior. You operate across all of these scales, depending on the context. A person might demand rigid procedures in a high-stress workplace, but actively seek out open-ended options when planning a vacation. The context dictates the algorithm. Resolving communication deadlocks is an engineering problem. You adjust your output, your vocabulary, sentence structure, and conceptual framing to precisely match the input parameters of the person across from you. When the linguistic patterns align, conscious resistance drops, and you gain access to the unconscious mind, where most data processing occurs. To master this level of interaction, stop listening exclusively to the content of an argument and begin analyzing the specific way a person constructs their reality. Modeling the results of successful figures, like Richard Branson, involves identifying the specific metaprograms they use to filter risk, recognize opportunity, and organize data. George Bernard Shaw observed that reasonable people adapt themselves to the world, while unreasonable people attempt to adapt the world to themselves. True progress is driven by those who are highly adaptable in their methodology, possessing the ability to translate their specific vision into terms anyone can understand. Effective influence relies on translating your objectives into the native architecture of the listener's mind.